So I would just like to hear, David, stories from your life where you feel like you've spent lots of time meditating, creating this sphere with these letters, connecting the paths, and I guess I just want to hear about how you were able to receive, higher dimensional information that helped you navigate life in a good way, or have magical experiences that you felt like you otherwise wouldn't have been able to have, that basically, what have you gotten out of doing this practice and creating these connections?
Yeah. Well, I want to say that the higher dimensional awareness and everything that we're talking about isn't in any way separate from the imminent world of here and now. And so what I think I've gotten out of it is a really deep embodiment of an accurate and precise epistemology, and that looking like discernment, where we live in this realm of there's surface level appearances and surface level meaning, and most people live in this shadow thing of shallow meanings and believe in that without ever seeing the deeper underlying truth of someone's being, or of some political situation or cultural situation or whatever it is. And usually for most people, the thing that reveals depth is time. Say somebody not initiate meets somebody, they have a first impression because this person is projecting whatever things, or they're projecting things onto them, but they're perceiving the surface level falsity as truth. And it's not till after being around this person for a year or two or whatever that time has revealed deeper patterns that could only be seen through the lens of a larger scope of zooming out of time. But when you're working with these structures that have already existed for so much time and exist for so much time, and perceiving at these higher dimensions, you start to interact with reality at that deeper level. So something that would take somebody else 2 years to realize, I realize it immediately. As soon as I look at a situation, it doesn't take me 2 years of observation. I can just tell immediately the deeper underlying truth. So we start to, self-identify as this immortal, undying thing, and see everything through the lens of that. Everything you see is this immortal, undying thing. So I don't see the temporary layers. I mean, I do, obviously, but I mean, in what I've taken from this and what I've gained is more of an ability to perceive the deeper archetypal reality, and to live in that mythic archetypal reality, and to see that in things, which creates a much higher, deeper, faster level of discernment that most people don't have. So that's immediately useful in all things. But I think beyond that, the reason these traditions exist is because they are the structure of the good that creates freedom, and they're passed down because they recognize the people, our descendants, our children who we want good things for, is hey, if you learn these things and live in alignment with them, your life will be good. If you forget these things and stop living in alignment with them, you're going to have struggles. You're not going to be as efficient at all of the struggles that life throws your way. Living in alignment and doing this way is this is the playbook for the struggles of duality. Here's how to win and create structures that are prosperous and healthy and free. And so the more that I've brought these things into my field, the more that has become my reality, and the more that I can radiate that out and help that become the reality of others. I think that is the remembrance, is like remembering these forms, but also like physically embody them. We're like coming back together, remembering with the structures of the forms by making it a part of our light body. If you want to think it that way, it was like the map of subjectivity through which we're perceiving so-called objectivity. Like we're cleansing the surface of it so that we have clarity of perception immediately, not like after a long time of having to had a bunch of hermeneutic pain reveal the truth to us. We can just perceive accurately and clearly upon first look. And I think that clear light of perception is talked about in a lot of traditions, but cleansing the sphere of sensation, cleaning the glass that we're looking through of subjectivity. I'm introducing another metaphor here, but I really think that like arranging it in the correct order, which is represented by the spheres and the paths, is a cleansing of the lens of perception.
Yeah, that's really deep. Well, I'm curious because I feel like this kind of meditation with the letters is actually a pretty rare thing these days. Like, I know that the Hebrew letters are considered sacred within Judaism, for example, but I can't think of anybody I know I can't think of any Jewish person I know who spends time, like, installing the Hebrew letters in their aura and meditating on them. I mean, I'm sure that there are some who do that, but, like, it's not like an average religious practice. Like, I guess I'm just curious because it seems there has been this maybe a kind of really like degradation and forgetting, like where people are not taking advantage of.
I heard to,
Anyways, that not a whole lot of people do this deep hyperbody practice with letters, and I guess it is a pretty involved practice, but I guess I'm just curious, you feel like it's just been forgotten? Do you feel like there's, is now a time that we're ripe for a renaissance of this? I don't know, I'm just curious because, there's lots of people who take their religion very seriously, but their religion seems to be made up mostly of like myths or parables or stories. They're not like installing letters in their bodies.
No, I get what you're saying. Well, there are different levels of precision, and for example, in Buddhism and or Hinduism rather, as the root of Buddhism, we have what people talk about now as the chakras, and this whole 7 chakra system that has become sort of objectified wasn't traditional. Traditionally, it was like this maps of the body where at different parts you would meditate on a little Ganesh inside your solar plexus, because that was imparting a certain needed energy to a certain part of your body. But there, our whole Buddhist traditions where you do see the deities in different parts of your body. There's ones where you self-emanate as the deity. And so this is the same thing. Instead of a letter, they are, doing it with a deity. And in Vajrayana, I don't know how explicit it's made in Buddhism generally, but in Shingon specifically, this guy named Kukai wrote about this. He says that, it's actually the Sanskrit letters, which they use even in all of the Asian countries. Like, they still use these Sanskrit letters to represent these deities and their mantras. And he was saying that the deity isn't really the root thing. The root thing is the letters that we use to create the deity. the deity is created by the letters. And if people want to relate to the deity as like an actual thing, they're not wrong. It's just that it's a pattern that's made up of deeper root causatory composite parts, which are these, you call them letters in the modern sense, but it's like these deeper archetypal principles that aren't even anthropomorphized. Like anthropomorphication is this projection of humans, but it's like the universe is much bigger and broader than just that one shape of life. So you have these deeper divinities that are these patterns that we've come to call letters. They're the things that we use to convey meaning and do magic with consciousness all the time, so much that we've forgotten that we even do it. But in that sense, even if you look at like Tumo practices and things, they use the Tibetan letter A, and they get into letter practices. And in general, I think it's been forgotten, and it is sort of this left and right hand path of like, you know, oh, well, there's the deity and I'm just this other thing. But realizing like the mouth as the womb of the universe, it's all fractal, and it's like these sounds are born inside the void and they're uttered out through the crossroads womb of the mouth. They're birthed into the outer world where they can change reality. And it's like, if anybody can speak letters, anybody, it can identify with God and the creative force through the mouth that they possess. And so that's a level of, you know, spiritual self-identification that's always been taboo in the past. Maybe it doesn't need to be in the future. But, you know, certain people are ready to take varying levels of self-responsibility. So I think that, and it's not even just to say that the letters are strictly better either. It's like this mathematical pattern and song and geometry of Hebrew is cool. The fact that it's also a linearly understandable myth of Genesis is what makes it super mind-boggling. So it's like the letters that make up the name of Ganesh versus Ganesh as a whole. It's like they're inseparable from one another. But if we just look at the larger form, like if we just read Genesis and don't study the letters, or if we just work with a deity and don't realize what is this deity's name a formula of, what are the atomic parts that form that, then we're missing at least like one half of the equation. But to just look at the letters, it's like, we don't even have an example of that. There's nobody that like just studies letters without trying to make larger chunks of meaning out of them. So we already do that part. Breaking it down into the composite parts is what people, let's say, have forgotten, have become unconscious of. Like you said, people just learn the alphabet, they learn how to read, but they just see them as like, yeah, these empty things that aren't, they don't realize what they are anymore.
Yeah, well, you've given me a lot to contemplate. I guess maybe a little bit more I'd like to ask you. So, you know, the paths of the Hermetic Tree of Life use the tarot cards and Hebrew letters. And in some ways, I guess maybe it's similar to what you were talking about with the, like, Buddhist tantric meditation deities. It's like the cards, you know, certainly all of the trumps have a lot of, there's a lot of anthropomorphizing stuff in the tarot cards that one could contemplate, I guess. And in some ways they seem more rich with information than just the little squiggles of the letters. So part of me is like, well, maybe I should just contemplate the tarot card paths. But then there's also something that seems like kind of more mysterious and more compelling about just the little lines of the letters themselves. but in a way, I feel like I don't know exactly how to contemplate a letter. You know, I know how to visualize, I guess, its shape, but it doesn't seem to lend itself to active imagination, for example, in the same way that a tarot card image does that could be entered into and animated. So, for example, if I was going to meditate on the Hebrew letter Yod, which is, you know, hand, and all of the letters are connected with the Yod, how would that go?
Well, this unification of right and left hand, right and left brain. So, you know, right brain, you have an image. Left brain, you have a word, you have meaning, you have all this chain of associations that your ego understands what a hand is, what a hand does. So the simplest way to do this, I would do, is visualize the Yod, think about hand, like your reticular activating system, the part of your consciousness that is like, creates a window that, you know, decides what perception you're going to see. So like you're looking through the window of hand and you're looking at Yod and you're making the sound Yi, and these three poles are like a two-dimensional point. Like each one of these is the point of a triangle. You have the image of the letter, the meaning of what that means, and the sound that it makes. If you hold these three in conjunction and just focus your mind only on those three things, you will start to rise up on the planes to the fourth point, creating a pyramid, which is this higher dimensional structure. And that will naturally happen because it is already existing. And it's like you're looking at the base of the pyramid. You can't see the whole thing yet, but whenever you make this sound and you look at this image and you contemplate the meaning, hand, Yod, Yi, then you will rise on the planes vertically in that, you know, field of syntropy. You'll see the higher dimensional structure of what is like two-dimensionally, three-dimensionally being hinted at here through the Hebrew alphabet. And you do that with all of them. I think that I would start with that, and then I would layer that onto the tarot card, because I'm like a strict traditional Puritan. I think that doing it without the tarot card first and investing some time in that is going to reveal a deeper clarity than trying to do it all at once. But after you spent some time and you've had some insights, higher dimensional insights about Yod and hand and all of these things and the shape, you know, just all of these different things, the sound, that's the sound of this shape. That's the shape of this sound. This is the shape and sound of the cosmic mystery that is a hand and what that means.
Ew, yeah.
And so, but we would see those as like a sound and a shape are two different things. It's like, no. Sound and shape are literally the exact same thing. We just look at them through different sensory organs, as like an ear versus an eye, but we don't realize that we're perceiving the vibration of a singular thing. So this helps us to connect with those higher dimensional things beyond the five physical sensory perceptions or perception organs. You know what I'm trying to say, the five senses basically. And then once you have some connection with that, contemplate the Hermit card, contemplate Virgo if you want. I think each piece I would add in separately, because this is like a complex layering of mysteries that are each their own thing. But layering Yod over the Hermit, over what are the two paths that it connects, seeing that mystery as a synthesis of these two Sephiroth, the arc of connection between those creates this. So then you start to get into a way that this is like a fractal of meaning that is so much more than the human mind is used to thinking.
Yeah, boy, it really is. Just as you were beginning to give that exposition about, the shape and the meaning and the sound, being like these three things that then take you to the higher dimensional fourth thing, I feel like I started to get an understanding about like hands and like yearning and grasping and desire and like the desire of divinity to come into manifestation. That was really like started to get really trippy really fast, even as you were just, I was like, yeah, feeling that. And so I can see how that's a really rich field of contemplation. Thank you for making that explicit for me. I guess another thing, and I like what you said about layering that with the other mysteries. So another thing that's really fascinating to me is, I've been aware of the Tree of Life for many years, and I've done the middle pillar and the LPRP, but I feel like the tree in a way didn't really come alive for me until beginning to do this sphere working practice. And I, in talking with you, because you've done it in the Rune Guild with Yggdrasil for a long time, it's like, I guess, it's a happy synchronicity, or just, well, we're married, we're connected, that like you have such deep experience with this kind of magical working. Because I feel like, the sphere working was like fucking like been forgotten about. Like, I got interested in reading everything I could about Florence Farr after meeting Florence Farr in a dream, and, found the sphere working because that's what her major contribution in the Golden Dawn was. But it's not emphasized in any, Golden Dawn textbook. John Michael Greer doesn't talk about it. Israel Regardie gives it doesn't really mention it. Anyways, I guess I'm curious, do you think, what's up with that? Why hasn't that been more emphasized in the Golden Dawn tradition?
I don't know, but I agree with what I think that maybe you're implying, and I'll give a really crude example, or exaggerated example, just to convey the essence. But I feel like the LBRP, this masterpiece, is like a beautiful Shakespearean sonnet. And teaching that to people first is like having a kid that doesn't know how to read and being here, memorize this sonnet. It's like they don't know the letters yet. They don't know words or grammar or like poetic meter. They don't know any of these things, but you're giving them like the completed formula of mastery. And that's what the LBRP and all of these things represent. Sonically, they're a great medicinal boon to consciousness, but they leave such a gap of unconsciousness that it's just like there's so much left on the table that's not, if people started with the letters and did the practice that I just told you before they even saw the Tree of Life, like the first thing should be learning the letters, learning the higher dimensional structures of them, then seeing the Tree of Life, and then seeing the synthesis of the paths. And after all of that's integrated and you have that, then starting to do these workings with divine names. And it's like, I'm saying Raphael, you're like Resh, Aleph, and you're like understanding what you're actually saying. You're not just like, oh, it's the medicine of God. It's like, what does that mean? Like, why is it this word? And why has it always been this word? What does that mean? And, so understanding it at that level, I think, can really appreciate the literature, as it were, at a deeper level than just the sonic quality of like, oh, it sounds nice. A 3-year-old might think Shakespeare sounds nice, but they're not going to appreciate it as much as like a post-grad of English literature would.
Fascinating. I think that's a really beautiful analogy, and I think that is really exactly, I guess, what's happening is that the LBRP is a beautiful sonnet that we tell people to memorize and use, and it certainly is better for them than not knowing that sonnet and not having access
I gotta go to the bathroom
to
real quick.